Novus, the new voice. Vox Novus, the new dimension. Vox Novus, thought and movement leaders who will share from their experience and offer tools to help us navigate our rapidly changing world. My name is Victor Fuhrman. Welcome to Vox Novus, the new voice. Are both the blessings and issues we experience in this lifetime tied to our ancestral roots? How may we identify and release the negativity and express gratitude to our ancestors for the positive aspects and lessons learned? My guest this week on Vox Novus, Dayal-Gulati, has created a practical guide to releasing the burden of transgenerational legacies and reclaiming our power to create the life we desire. Dayal-Gulati is an energy practitioner and transformational coach with a doctorate in economics. After 15 years in finance and academia, she began a new path helping people release the past and reclaim their power. Anu is trained in both flower essence therapy and family constellation therapy. Her website is healyourancestral.roots.com, and she joins me this week to share her path and new book, Heal Your Ancestral Roots, Release the Family Patterns That Hold You Back. Please join me in welcoming to Vox Novus, Dayal-Gulati. Welcome, Anu.
Thank you, Victor. Thank you for having me on your show.
Lovely to have you here today. Please share with us your early path and how it led you to pursue an initial career in finance.
I think there was a part of me that always wanted to change the world from a very young age, and I don't know where that came from. And I thought economics was the way to do it. And so I started studying that in school, college, and I felt like that was what I was going to do. And so I ended up coming to the US to study economics. I came to Brown University on a scholarship. And I thought, I'm just going to go back and I'm going to continue to do this work. But then life took a turn. I got married, and all of a sudden, it wasn't just my decision anymore. And we were living here, and I was pursuing what I thought was the American dream until I got really sick. And that's when I started to recognize that perhaps things were not going to go the way I had planned. And that's how I started to shift from what I wanted to do, and I was being led in twists and turns to a different path. And perhaps at some level it was meant to be, but when it happened, I didn't really think of it that way, and it was very, very traumatic when it did. So I got really sick, and I had to go into the ER, and I thought, I'm going to come out, I'm going to be okay, life will go on as usual. But then one night out of nowhere, I had to go back in, and I started to be scared. I started to have that feeling of like, I don't know what's going on. And then when I had to go in a third time, that's when I started to feel really frightened. And I could tell that the doctors didn't really know what was going on. But I had a friend who came to see me in the ER, and she was into alternative healing. And she held my hand, and she asked me, she said, Anu, how many times are you going to go through this before you're willing to try something new, before you're willing to change? And I remember her words really struck home, and I can still feel them to this day. And I literally willed myself out of the hospital, and I started to explore alternative methods of healing. So I found this amazing Chinese medicine doctor, and I discovered flower essences. And those were the two things that, brought me back to health and also changed the trajectory of my life. Because after that, I quit academia and I went into alternative healing. But I think the most important thing I realized from that whole episode is hope is really important in our life. And I feel that's what I really want people to to recognize that they are never powerless, that they can always take action, they can always create change in their life. And that's what I feel is my purpose. This is what I want to do. And so that completely shifted my trajectory from economics as a way of changing the world to simply like helping people find that they are never powerless.
In retrospect, do you think that that illness pattern that emerged for you was some type of an intervention, be it through the divine or through your own soul?
Yes, it definitely was. It definitely was an intervention. And of course, now I can look back and see that. But when I was through it, when I was going through it, it didn't feel that way. I felt this real sense of despair. Like, what is going to happen to me? You know, can I go back to doing anything? So I feel that if we hang in there, and when we look back, we can start to see the dots and connect things in a way that we can't really do when we're in it.
Your new book is entitled Heal Your Ancestral Roots. Release the family patterns that hold you back. First of all, what are ancestral roots?
In a lot of traditions, in the Native American traditions and the Eastern traditions, our ancestors are not just our parents or our grandparents. They include those who came up to 7 generations before. And we all know that at some level we are affected by our parents. We take on their patterns or impacted by them. But really, in these Eastern traditions, our ancestors going back 7 generations impact us because we take on whatever they left unresolved or whatever was left unresolved. And we take it upon ourselves to heal that. And when we do that, we not only heal ourselves, we heal those who came before us. And because we are the ancestors of 7 generations to come, our actions impact those who come after us. So when we take the responsibility of healing ourselves, we heal those who come after us. And in many ways, we start to heal the world.
And how do you determine 7 generations?
It's the generation starting before you. Your parents, grandparents, and going up to the 7 generations prior to that. And if you count that, that's 252 mothers and fathers who need to have existed in order for us to be on Earth today.
Wow, that's something to think about.
That's a lot, more than we ever think.
And why do we stop at 7? I'm just curious why we stop at 7 rather than go back further.
It's interesting. I think perhaps after that, the energy starts to dissipate, or perhaps, we come back as our own. We were the ancestors and we come back. I'm not sure why it ends at 7. But I think the energy starts to dissipate because 7 generations is about 230, 40 years already. So it's a long time. What I do see, though, when I listen to my clients, that if they do know their family history, for a lot of them, it might just go back up to the great grandparents. So they don't know more than that. So if they're going to identify a pattern, it's up to 4 generations. And before that, they don't seem to remember that much, or the knowledge is just lost.
And is there also a connection with what science is now calling epigenetics, where the traditions and the things that have happened in the family in the past are passed on literally through the genetic system?
Yes. In fact, there is a very famous study about the mice where the male mouse was exposed to the smell of the cherry blossom and then given an electric shock. And they found that even up to 4 generations later, the offspring were afraid of the smell of the cherry blossom, even without the shock, and even never having met the great grandparent 4 generations ago, never having met that parent mouse, the male mouse, they still experience fear related to that smell.
So we literally can carry trauma in our genes.
Yes, we literally can carry trauma in our genes. It's just sort of encoded in our limbic system. It's there. I think this is why so many traditions had these practices of honoring the ancestors. Because even if you didn't know the trauma, by honoring and respecting them, the rituals probably released some of the trauma because it allowed you to make peace with your ancestry. Even if you didn't know what it was or you knew what it was, because that feeling of respect, of acceptance, of letting go, probably some of those emotions started to come in to shift that energy.
And by the same token, we can also go back and express gratitude and love for all of the things they brought forward for us.
Yes, absolutely, Victor. Because the transgenerational gifts that we receive, if we practice gratitude, we start to notice them. And oftentimes we just focus on the burden of what we have received or the challenges. And even in those challenges are gifts. But the more we notice the blessings, I think the more we start to expand our capacity to live in the present.
Absolutely. Now, who is this book for and what can it do for them?
Well, you know how you might have someone who really wants something in their life, whether it's a personal relationship, whether it's professional success, financial success, or a career goal, and they feel that they've worked really hard towards it. They've done their best. They've done everything they could. And yet something eludes them. It's as if they never quite get what they wanted. There's a ceiling on their life. Well, in this book, I share how the problem that you're facing may not have originated with you. It might have started before you. And so I offer a roadmap or a guide to help people identify and release these transgenerational patterns so that they can start to create the life they want. So that's really who the book is for. Anyone who's feeling like I've tried everything and I still feel stuck.
We've touched upon transgenerational patterns in our previous discussion. What are they and why are they important in healing our lives?
Transgenerational patterns are patterns that repeat from one generation to the next. And they really are the energy of unresolved emotions. And maybe it might be easiest if I sort of shared the story of a client. She was this lovely woman from Canada. And she called me because she had heard about the work I was doing. And she actually had started to notice these patterns in her own life. So what started it all is that her son called her and said, I'm quitting my job and I don't really want to work right now. And she sort of had this panic feeling because she realized that in her family, she was the primary breadwinner. Her two daughters were the primary breadwinners. And when her son said he's going to quit his job, she was like, oh my God, he's doing the same thing. And when she and I started to explore this, we realized it was her mother who was the primary breadwinner as well, including her maternal grandmother. So in today's day and age, I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing if the woman is the primary breadwinner, but the men were not carrying their weight in the relationship. And that was what was really affecting all of the women. And so she also discovered that the feelings she was holding were feelings of shame, of anger, of resentment towards her father, towards her grandfather, her sons-in-law. There was all of this emotion. So when we started working together, she started a practice of honoring her ancestors. And through the healing modalities of flower essences, she started to be able to release some of the feelings and emotions she was carrying about all of this from the past. And as she started to come into a more peaceful place, she also was able to let go of control of her son, try to fix her son. And one day, after she had been doing this for a few months, her son called her and he said, Mom, I just wanted to let you know I've gone back to work. And I don't know what came over me. I mean, she was thrilled. I was thrilled to hear that. But what really struck me was her son said, I don't know what came over me, and I'm never going to do that again. That made me realize the energy of this family field, the energy of these patterns had shifted. And that's how healing happens. She didn't need to change her son. She didn't need to change anybody. She shifted and the change happened. That's how much power an individual has.
That's truly amazing and truly wonderful. And I'm wondering, now you talk about negative patterns and transgenerational patterns. What about positive transgenerational patterns? How do they express themselves?
They express themselves in so many beautiful ways. And that's why gratitude, as you mentioned, is so important, because we don't think about it, but we inherit perhaps, a parent's sense of humor, their artistic talents, their scientific mind, their ability to work with their hands, a sense of open-heartedness, compassion, generosity, creativity. There's so many things we inherit. And if we start to notice, we start to recognize that we are part of something bigger. We're part of a flow that comes forward through us, flows through us. And so recognizing that also allows us to have a coherence within us as we start to carry our ancestors within, that we are not separate from them, we are part of them. And this, I think, really allows people to live with a much more open heart, a much more sense of releasing expectations of others, of the world, and feeling more satisfied and complete inside.
And I would think that it would also give them a sense of connectivity to those prior generations in a positive way.
Yes. Because when we are looking for a coherence within us, holding our ancestors within us, holding our parents within us, if we can, with a sense of gratitude and a sense of awareness and compassion, it starts to allow us to release feelings of resentment and anger, because essentially ancestral healing happens when we can release the feeling that we're a victim of what came before us. So releasing that feeling of victimhood, gives us the freedom to stand and be present and then create the life we want.
It's interesting that you share that. I'm going to share a personal story. My relationship with my father was not the best, and no reason to bring up old pain or old wounds with this. But when I was 8 years old, he became ill, and I became part of his healing team with my mother in terms of taking care of him and seeing to his needs and so on. And he passed when I was 15. And I recognized a few things that came from that relationship. Number one, it wired in me the sense of giving healing and caring for others, no matter what the relationship might be. Number two, he was very gifted with words. And the voice that I carry right now is the same voice my father had. I had this voice when I was 13 years old. So I have the voice from him. And also his ability to rhyme. He was a rhymer and wrote poetry, and I also write poetry. And I really can't trace it back beyond that because my grandparents came from Europe and spoke really a different language. But I think that this concept of these things that my father passed on to me are wonderful gifts. And in retrospect, I am so grateful to him for the gifts that he shared with me.
Yes. And I think that's so beautiful, Victor. And I think what I love about your story is that you recognize these are the gifts that you got from him, because when we are angry with a parent, the gifts that we have received from the lineage may not have that chance to flower. So it's just acknowledging that I received this also. Yes, we also receive the pain, but that then allows us to chart a different path forward to say, I don't want to be that. I don't want to do that, but I'm choosing differently. And it also, as you said, allows your gifts to come into their full power.
Absolutely. And just to finish that story, one of the things that was wired in my young mind, taking care of my father, was that when you care for others, you will be loved. And it wired that path in my life until I recognized, in addition to caring for others, I also had to take care of and love myself, which happened in my mid to late 30s with another life-changing experience. So grasping that knowledge and that information and being able to understand it and then move forward from it is so very important.
Yes, yes, yes. Because you're so right. Because when we cannot love ourselves, we're looking for something outside of us. We're looking for it from somebody else. And I've come to realize that, having expectations of others from something that you cannot give yourself is like trying to draw water from an empty well.
Yes.
You cannot fill yourself from that. But if you give yourself the love, the acknowledgement, the appreciation, everything that you're looking for, you can fill up and be present with others without expectation. And then you can be fully present to the relationship as it is.
Absolutely. My guest, Anu Dayal-Gulati, her book, Heal Your Ancestral Roots, Release the Family Patterns That Hold You Back. Anu, please tell our listeners where they can get your book and find out more about you and your work.
My book is available wherever books are sold, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and from my publisher, Inner Traditions. And my website is healyourancestralroots.com. Anyone can get in touch with me through my website.
And we'll be back with more of Anu and Heal Your Ancestral Roots after these words on the OMTimes Radio Network.
Free your mind with OMTimes Radio, IOM-FM. OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
More than 24 million Americans have an autoimmune disorder, and that number continues to grow. I'm Sharon Saylor, and I'm one of those 24 million. To put that number in perspective, cancer affects about 9 million and heart disease up to 22 million. That's why I've brought together top experts and those thriving regardless of their diagnosis to bring you the latest, most up-to-date information. Join me, Sharon Saylor, Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, for the Autoimmune Hour on Life Interrupted Radio to find out how to live your life uninterrupted.
Melissa from Michigan. I work an extra part-time job serving lunch at my child's school, but I still can't afford to put food on our table.
Daniel from California. Choosing whether to pay the rent or pay to fix the car to get to work doesn't leave us with much at all. Now we can't even pay for meals.
Hunger is a story we can end. End it at feedingamerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Hi, this is Bill Maher. I can find humor in almost anything, but one thing I never laugh about is cruelty to animals. If you don't get the joke either, write People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, 501 Front Street, Norfolk, Virginia, 23510.
Back on Vox Novus, my guest this week, Anu Dayal-Gulati, her book, Heal Your Ancestral Roots, Release the Family Patterns That Hold You Back. Anu, what are the most common issues people have that you've helped to heal with this work?
There's a lot of research out there that says the quality of your life is the quality of your relationships. And what I find is when people come to me, there's a feeling of being stuck in something related to their relationships. It could be a relationship with a parent. It could be a relationship with a child or children, a boss, co-workers, colleagues. It could be that they want to get into a relationship. They want to leave a relationship. They want to deepen a relationship. But at the end, even if there's something peripheral, it's always the relationship. And what I've come to realize is that underneath this feeling of the struggle with the relationships, there is actually a disconnection from ourselves. So this feeling of this disconnection then manifests in wanting so much more from a relationship or not being able to be fully present in it. And the work that I do is about healing the disconnection within. Because if you can give yourself what you're looking for from outside, then you can start the healing process. And in some ways, we're hardwired to want connection with others. And especially from our parents, we want that appreciation, that acknowledgement, that validation, that you see me for who I am and I'm okay. And oftentimes parents may not be able to give that. So when we start to become an adult, and if we can start to give ourselves that and realize that perhaps our parents had limitations from the way they were parented, from what they had to go through, and they couldn't really give it to us, then we can start to release those expectations, release that my parent is going to say sorry, my parent is going to do this or that, and reclaim our power. And when we start to do that, we start to be able to, live life on our terms, to start to create possibility for ourselves. We're not trapped in the past.
Your work is based upon family constellations. What are family constellations?
So family constellation is based on the idea that family is an energy field. And although I've talked about parents and grandparents and, mothers and fathers, it's based on the idea that your family is even bigger than that. It includes people your family has harmed. It includes people who have benefited, who have married in. So it includes a whole range of people. And what it is in family constellation therapy, it's really an energy process. So you come, and it's a group process where people sit in a circle, and if you're presenting your problem, you're asking for a window of understanding into what has caused the pain you're feeling. And you invite someone, it's facilitated, there's a facilitator, a trained facilitator, and you as the client invite someone to represent you, and you are asked by the facilitator to invite people to represent different parts of your family. And the amazing thing about it is that people who are asked to represent step inside the circle and start to feel the emotions. They start to express the body language of the family members. And it doesn't matter whether the family member is alive or not alive. It starts to manifest inside that circle. And the process, when it plays out, it allows the client to see this is the backstory about why I'm dealing with this. This is why I'm struggling with this feeling. This is why I'm struggling with the problem. And it's just this beautiful insight. Then you actually have to integrate that insight in your life. But it's actually opens the heart. It opens the heart to compassion, to understanding, and to healing. And that's the beautiful part about this process. It's more heart-centered, less intellectual, because the longest healing journey is really from the head to the heart. That's the distance we have to travel.
And how has using family constellations influenced your work with people who have transgenerational patterns?
Well, I can share my example. So when I moved multiple times in my adult life, and when I moved, the last move was from Chicago to Boston. And each time I've moved, my support network has fractured. And my last move, I lost my sense of identity because I quit my job. I did all of these things. But what I realized is I had lost my father right after I moved. And My sister, my mother, and I, each of us was in a city where we hadn't grown up. We hadn't gone to school there. We didn't belong there. This feeling of like, I don't belong here was so strong. And of trying to feel like I needed to fit in, I needed to do this so I would be accepted, I would be part of this fabric of society where I'm living in. And I think the biggest thing I healed through the work on transgenerational patterns was recognizing this pattern extended before my mother to my grandmother, and recognizing that home is not where you live. It's where you belong. And I could not belong outside of myself. I needed to belong to myself first and foremost. And when I did that, I could be comfortable anywhere. And so, although I traveled all the way from India to the United States, I feel like I finally came home to myself. And that's really what the feeling of being home is and belonging is, because you cannot belong anywhere else.
So understanding transgenerational patterns really changed your life.
Yes, it really did, because, and this is the framework that I wanted to share with people, that this idea of home, how do you come home to yourself? It's through honoring your ancestors. It's by observing your emotions, because they're a compass to bring you home. It's by recognizing that you're a spiritual being, so magnifying your spiritual connection, and ultimately to engage with Mother Earth, our true mother, the mother of all mothers, the mother of all fathers. She's the one who nurtures us. So coming home to ourselves is like practicing these 4 things that bring us home.
And that home is anywhere where we are when we are with ourselves.
Yes, beautifully said, Victor.
What can people do to change them once they discover the transgenerational patterns getting in their way?
There are 2 key ways in which they can start to shift the ancestral patterns. One is by honoring the ancestors. And although different traditions have had different ways of doing it, one of the most simplest ways of doing it is creating what is called an ancestral altar. And Alberto Villoldo, who was a Cuban medical anthropologist, he discovered that in South America, there were ancestral altars. And he said, we kind of always thought that these were for ancestor worship. But he said it's not for worshiping your ancestors. It's for knowing, it's like creating this altar allows you to know where your ancestors are. Because if you don't know where they are, they're running amok, ruining your life. So it's better to know where they are than to have them like just running around. So an altar, an ancestral altar, creates a way of anchoring the ancestral energy. By honoring your ancestors, it allows them to lift off the earth plane and into higher realms where the souls can evolve, and then they can become more helpful. The other way in which we can release the transgenerational patterns is simply by expanding our emotional range. Because a lot of times we are carrying emotions of like anger, sadness, grief, regret, bitterness, and those keep us trapped in sort of lower vibrations. So if we can expand our emotional range, then we can start to create change. We start to be able to create possibility. Because that's really where the change starts to happen, when we start to be able to expand our emotional range.
And embrace them.
Yes, because again, the transgenerational pattern is the energy of unresolved emotion. And so, if we're constantly circling in those negative emotions, we cannot shift out and create new emotional patterns or new emotional responses, which is the portal into healing.
You had talked about your experience and your work with flower essences. What are they and how can they help us to heal?
So, like I said before, Victor, is the longest healing journey is from the head to the heart. And all of those expectations that we have from childhood, which are not met, start to make us close off our heart and create these bars around it. And we start to feel I'm not good enough. I'm not lovable. But we can think of flower essences as medicine from Mother Nature directly, because they really are the energy of the flower. For thousands of years, dew was considered sacred. It was considered to have healing properties, but it's really challenging to collect dew. So Dr. Bach, who was this English surgeon in the 1930s, he found a way to recreate the healing property of dew and also to stabilize it. So flower essences are really wildflower infusions in spring water preserved with brandy. So it's the energetic property of the flower. And researchers at the University of Glasgow in Scotland found that there are 4 primary emotions: fear, anger, sadness, and joy. And a lot of times we're cycling in the first 3. And what Dr. Bach did is he identified the nuances of each of these emotions. So for instance, if you think of fear, there's several different kinds of fear. And he identified the flowers and the corresponding flower essences that would help shift those different kinds of fear, like fear of death, fear of airplanes, fear of your loved ones, paralyzing fear that keeps you rooted to the spot. So all of those nuances, the flower essences help shift all these emotions so that you can start to experience more positive emotions.
And how does someone know that the essences are working, and what are the results?
The essences work very gently and gradually. But in a few weeks, my clients will report, I feel calmer, I feel more confident, I feel like I can trust myself, I know what to do. So they are very subtle, but they activate your internal guidance system. They activate a sense of direction within you, a sense of trusting yourself, a sense of journeying back to yourself. So that's really what they do.
What would you say is one of the best ways that we may heal our roots?
There is an African proverb that says, when you cut your chains, you free yourself. When you cut your roots, you die. And one of the best ways to heal your roots, even if you know nothing about your parents or ancestors, is simply to let go of the feeling of victimhood, to take responsibility for your life. And that's easier said than done, but just starting the journey of connecting with your emotions starts the process of healing. You really don't even need to know anything about who came before you. But the more you connect with your emotions, the more you start to connect with yourself. And that's all one really needs to do. And I'd love to just share an example of that. So, for instance, if you take the emotion jealousy, we often think of jealousy as such a negative emotion, but underlying jealousy, there could be like a feeling of sadness, like I can't have what he or she has. It could be that I tried and I failed and I don't know what to do next. Or I know this I will never have in my life. So there's emotions of sadness, of bitterness, of fear. There's so many underlying emotions. So if you see the primary emotion that's come up, jealousy, as an invitation to go within, to connect with yourself and see what you really need, you can start the process of shifting and of creating change, of healing your ancestral roots, because you start to expand your emotional range. So at some level, you're starting to take responsibility for yourself and for your life. And that starts the process of healing.
My guest is Anu Dayal-Gulati. Her book, Heal Your Ancestral Roots. We'll be back with more after these words on the OMTimes Radio Network.
Humanity Healing International is a small nonprofit with a big dream. Since 2007, HHI has been working tirelessly to bring help to communities with little or no hope. Our projects are not broad mandates, nor are they overnight solutions, but they bring the reassurance that no one is alone and that someone cares. To learn more, please visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Hi, I'm Danica Patrick and proud aunt. Watching my nieces grow, play, and learn is amazing, but not every child gets to be carefree. 1 in 6 kids in the U.S. are hungry. 1 in 6. That little girl sitting alone at the playground, she can't play like the other kids. She doesn't have the energy because she's hungry. School lunch will be her only meal today. It breaks my heart that this is the reality in our country, but it's something that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste. This food is then provided to families and children in need. Being a kid should be about using your imagination, learning, and having fun. These children shouldn't have to miss out on simply being a kid because they're hungry. To find out how you can help end childhood hunger in your community, visit feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
He was the heart of your family, and he taught you our history. He helped you fix your first flat. He was the best backyard DJ around, and every time he'd tell a story, he'd own the room. But now more than ever, he may feel alone. Today, older adults and their loved ones are struggling to connect, in a time when connection has never been more important. But there is something we can do. Embrace our older loved ones through StoryCorps Connect. With StoryCorps Connect, you can honor seniors remotely with an interview about their life. Every interview will be archived at the Library of Congress, becoming part of American history, so that years from now, future generations can listen in.
All right, Grandpa, what's one piece of advice you have for me?
Just 3 words, sweetheart. Live with courage.
The man that had the best stories still has plenty of stories to tell. So connect virtually and share the conversation of a lifetime at storycorpsconnect.org/AARP. Connect, honor, share. StoryCorps Connect. A message from AARP, StoryCorps, and the Ad Council.
More than 24 million Americans have an autoimmune disorder, and that number continues to grow. I'm Sharon Saylor, and I'm one of those 24 million. To put that number in perspective, cancer affects about 9 million and heart disease up to 22 million. That's why I've brought together top experts and those thriving regardless of their diagnosis to bring you the latest, most up-to-date information. Join me, Sharon Saylor, Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, for the Autoimmune Hour on Life Interrupted Radio to find out how to live your life uninterrupted.
Consistently attract soulmate clients, begin showing up on brand, monetizing on your calling. Welcome all spiritual coaches, leaders, healers, light workers, and practitioners to a show that turns you on in your business and amplifies your magnetism. I'm host, catalyst, and spiritual business coach Rosalind Fung, and I'm here to journey with you into the juicy and help you discover where the real gaps are. Ignite your mindset and soul with strategies and systems as each episode takes you to the sweet spot that activates your soulgasmic business by tuning in on Tuesdays at 10 a.m. Mountain. Join me for your light language activation and let's magnetize and monetize.
Hey, son, how are you feeling?
I'm fine, Pops.
What's on your mind?
I can't explain it.
When your kid can't find the language, find the lyrics. Start a conversation at soundidouttogether.org. Brought to you by Ad Council and Pivotal Ventures.
Back on Vox Novus, my guest this week, Anu Dayal-Gulati, her book, Heal Your Ancestral Roots. Anu, what is the Vedic ritual of Tarpanam?
Victor, A lot of traditions have prayers for the ancestors because prayers actually connect us with the invisible, whether it's a spiritual connection or whether it's prayers for our ancestors. And like I said before, this is in the Indian tradition, we offer these prayers for the evolution of our ancestors' souls and for gratitude for them. So I have a modified version of this in the book, where this is a prayer for the souls of your ancestors to be in peace and harmony. And from that place, if they can bless us, who, since we represent the part of them that lives on earth, and we are here to do the unresolved work of the generations before. So inviting their blessings for us in our life. And, we had a physical counterpart of this in India when I was growing up, because if you went to visit like somebody older to you, like your grandparents, or in another time it was also your parents, you touched their feet before you left. And the act of touching their feet was a way of asking for their blessings for the journey that you were going to go on, whether you were going to school or college or your business work or wherever you were going, or just a trip. But, we are psychologically wired to ask for permission, or even if we don't ask for it, we are expecting permission to do something different, to be disloyal to what we think they expect of us. So asking for blessings allows us to live our life and move forward. Permission keeps us tied in some ways to invisible loyalties that we're sort of carrying in our head.
And you share in your book that you give us a glimpse into the invisible world. What do you mean by that?
The invisible world is surrounding us all the time, whether it's our subconscious that we're unaware of, whether it's our ancestral patterns, whether it's the emotions that are raging inside of us, maybe like a big green monster or a huge monster like that's ravaging us as in our subconscious. So there's all of that that's invisible. And then there's the part of our ancestors that are invisible, that are making their presence felt through these repetitive patterns in our life, keeping us stuck. And then there is this beautiful, invisible spiritual world that is supporting us. And so if we think of karma as, something that makes its presence felt, that we have to make amends for, or we have to do something to repair a wrongdoing that has happened before. The invisible world makes its presence felt through the act of grace, through synchronicities, through these unexpected coincidences, to help that arrives unexpectedly, that word, that piece of music, that piece of advice that comes, so that you're not alone. No matter how hard it is, you are not alone. You're being given the tools and the support to move forward.
And you offer a framework called H.O.M.E, home. What is this and how does it work?
So like I said before, we can only belong to ourselves. We cannot belong outside of ourselves. And the more we can reconnect with ourselves and restore the connection to ourselves, the more at peace we're going to be, the happier we're going to be. So home is just four processes that each of which will bring you home: honoring your ancestors, observing your emotions for the message they're sending you about where you have disconnected from yourself, magnifying your spiritual connection, and engaging with Mother Earth. And the very last one that I want to share is, emotions, you can think of them as energy in motion. And so the emotion needs to have a place to go. And if you take a walk in nature and you go outside, something is bothering you, and you come back, you feel better. So whatever you can do to support the transformation of your emotion and reconnecting to earth, to yourself, to nature, to your magnifying your spiritual connection, all of that brings you home. Journaling is another way. It's a really cheap and effective form of therapy where you can simply put your emotions on paper, and all of these actions bring you home to yourself.
And there's an old expression, home is where the hearth is, but in reality, home is where the heart is.
Yes, that's so true, Victor. Yes, we want to open our hearts. That's what heals us.
You share that faith takes us beyond synchronicity. Please explain.
I think when we start to notice the blessings in our life, we start to notice these little synchronicities that show up that allow us to see that we're being taken care of. And yet our dreams, our aspirations still seem out of reach. I think that's when we have faith, we can start to recognize that this is going to happen in divine time. We have to grow into that process. So faith allows us to say, I know this is what I want. Perhaps there's something better. Perhaps there's something different. Perhaps that I need to grow into it. But trusting that there is something bigger, and there is a path, there's a journey for my soul. And my soul journey is greater than the journey of my ego. So faith allows us to step into that space of uncertainty with greater peace, with greater acceptance, and with greater trust.
And as we shared offline, I had been taught an expression that says everything is unfolding in divine order. You have to be able to see it with spiritual eyes. And you said there's an add-on to that, which is wonderful. Please share that with us.
That yes, everything is happening in divine time and in divine order for your growth. So
for our growth.
Yes. So whatever discomfort we're feeling with, this is not what I wanted, this is not what I expected, it's still happening in divine time, but you're growing into that person you're becoming.
And coming full circle, your experience with illness in your first career, that was really divine order, wasn't it?
That really was. Though when it was happening, I couldn't feel that. I didn't feel like this was happening for me. It was happening to me. And now I think every day when something is not happening the way I want it to, I ask myself, what is it that I need to learn? What do I need to see? What do I need to understand? What do I need to do differently? And so I enter into this dialogue with the universe. And I feel like that lends a magic to my day because it expands my capacity to hold everything.
Literally attending spiritual school.
Yes, yes.
Learning the lessons that we need to learn so that we can move forward, both on our own soul level and on our ancestral level and on the level of those that we live and love with.
Absolutely, Victor. Absolutely.
What would you like readers to take away from Heal Your Ancestral Roots?
I would really want readers to understand that connecting with yourself, restoring connection to yourself is the most important thing you can do. And the universe is laying the crumbs for you to follow the path home. So pay attention, notice what's happening, look for the patterns. Everything is speaking to you. And just starting to live more intentionally and more with greater awareness will shift everything that starts to unfold in your life.
Beautiful.
And you will be able to create that.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with us. Her name is Anu Dayal-Gulati. Her book, Heal your ancestral roots. Release the family patterns that hold you back. Anu, one more time, please share with our listeners where they can get your book and find out more about you and your wonderful work.
Thank you, Victor. The book is available at Barnes & Noble, Inner Traditions, my publisher, and Amazon. My website is healyourancestral.roots.com.
And what do you offer on your website?
I offer information on flower essences, on their services that I offer. I offer blogs that share tips on different flower essences, different healing ways of connecting with your ancestors, information on my workshops and upcoming events that are both online and in person. So online, anyone can join into the workshops. They can join the Facebook group where I also offer information on different things that can help shift these ancestral burdens.
Anu, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your experience and your wisdom.
Thank you so much, Victor, for having me.
And thank you for joining us on Vox Novus. I'm Victor, the Voice Fuhrman. Have a wonderful week.